There is a truth most people never realize until they've been hurt far too deeply. The narcissist was never truly powerful. They are not strong, not supernatural, and they possess no mystical intelligence. The only thing they have is the ability to touch the parts of you that you yourself have avoided, the parts forgotten, suppressed, hidden in the unconscious. The fear of abandonment, the longing to be loved, the need to prove your worth, the fragility of your inner child. These are the doors they walk through to control you. But the fault is not yours. No one is taught how to see their own darkness. No one is taught that our vulnerability doesn't lie in our circumstances, but in the way we think. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that is exactly why the narcissist appears in your life. They are the final shape of the unconscious that you have not yet learned to face. Their power is only strong when your mind operates through old patterns, reacting, explaining, worrying, seeking permission, trying to please, trying to prove that you are worthy. When you think that way, you unconsciously hand them your keys. You think you're protecting love, but in truth, you are abandoning yourself. You think you're trying to save the relationship, but you are really silencing the voice of your own soul. And that is when they win, not through their strength, but through your fractures. But the miracle is this: you only need to change one thing, your thinking, and their entire matrix of power collapses. When you shift from reacting to observing, you step out of the role they wrote for you. When you shift from the fearful ego to the sovereign self, you are no longer programmable. When you no longer seek external validation, their subtle methods of control become invisible, ineffective. You become unmanipulable. You don't need to fight them, you only need to awaken. Because light never fights darkness, it merely needs to exist, and darkness disappears on its own. And when you begin to think on the frequency of awareness, the frequency of someone who knows who they are, someone who does not need permission to exist, the narcissist loses their power instantly. Not because you defeated them, but because you now stand on a level they cannot reach. This is the moment you reclaim your mind, your energy, and your sovereignty quietly, without noise, yet with more strength than any battle could ever offer. 1. Principle 1. Emotional detachment. Detachment is not coldness. It is the moment you step out of the role your childhood forced you to carry. This is not withdrawing from love, it is returning to your true self, where no one else is allowed to program your emotions. And that very detachment is what makes the narcissist's power collapse instantly, because they can only manipulate you when they still control the emotional layers that never belong to you, yet you've been carrying since childhood. To understand why emotional detachment is so powerful, you must look at the origin point. An empath is not born, an empath is formed. It begins with a very small crack in childhood, a seemingly insignificant moment that shapes your entire energetic structure. It is the moment a child realizes, my emotions are not welcome. To survive, I must predict the emotions of others first. From that moment, you become the emotional radar of your household. You read the eyes of adults to know whether to speak or stay silent. You adjust your tone, your energy to keep the peace. You learn to feel other people before they even know what they're feeling. And while you become better and better at reading others, you lose the ability to read yourself. Jung called this distortion separation from the self. The child leaves their true center and lives through an adaptive ego, the good child, the healer, the pleaser. And this energetic structure, always open, always outward, always feeling for others, becomes the very signal narcissists recognize immediately. Not because you are weak, but because your energy shines in a way that makes hollow souls feel they have found an entry point. You are familiar with orbiting around the emotions of others, and they are familiar with making others orbit around their ego. These two structures lock together like two pieces of shadow. A narcissist does not conquer you through strength. They conquer you through what you lacked, the attention you never received, the feeling of being seen that your inner child has waited for all its life. They step right into the crack within you and turn it into an energetic hook. When you react, they control. When you hurt, they gain leverage. When you try to understand them, You drift further away from yourself. But all their power depends on one mechanism. They need you to feel with them. They need you to ignite so they can feed. They need you to react so they can adjust you. They need you to be destabilized so they can maintain dominance. And this is where principle one becomes a strike at the core. When you detach emotionally, you pull out the entire power source they feed on. Detachment is not freezing. It is the moment you stop syncing your frequency with theirs. You stop absorbing their emotions. You no longer get pulled into the script they write. You step off the stage. And when you step off, the entire play collapses because there is no one left to perform with. When you stop reacting, they have nothing to manipulate. When you stand still, they lose the mirror that reflects their ego. When you fall silent, they hear the echo of themselves, the very thing they fear most. When you stop feeling for them, they are forced to feel themselves something they cannot handle. And when you return to your own center, you become impenetrable, because there is no excess emotional material left for them to cling to. Jung called this state returning to the self, the moment you stop living through reaction and start living through awareness. And in that stillness, all the narcissist's power dissolves, not because you fought them, but because you stopped supplying them. Not because you became stronger than them, but because you finally stood in your own light. Principle 2, awaken thinking from reactive ego to observing soul. If emotional detachment is unplugging the narcissist from your energy source, awakened thinking is the moment you realize that all along you were the one unconsciously holding your hand on the switch. A narcissist does not enter your life through their physical presence. They enter through the story they plant inside your mind. They do not control you by tying your hands and feet. They control you by making you believe thoughts that make you tie yourself. Am I wrong? I'm too sensitive. I must try harder. If I leave, I'm the bad person. Principle 2. Awakened thinking is the moment you stop blindly believing every thought that appears in your mind and begin observing them as streams of energy passing through your field of consciousness. On the energetic and spiritual plane, thoughts are not just thoughts. They are frequencies. They either pull you upward toward the self, where you are clear, still, luminous, or drag you downward toward shadow complexes, where you react, tremble, and get triggered. The narcissist survives by hacking this frequency. They activate thoughts inside you that push you out of your center, forcing you to run and put out their fires. Awakened thinking is when you turn the camera inward, no longer focusing on their performance, but observing the stage within yourself. You begin asking soul-level questions. Does this emotion even belong to me? Whose story am I believing? The voice accusing me in my mind. Does it sound like me, or is it the echo of someone who once made me feel small? Each time you pause to observe instead of react, you perform a spiritual act. You pull yourself out of the realm of the ego and closer to the self. The ego is the surface of the water, where every passing wind can make waves. The self is the ocean floor, where movement exists but is never disturbed by the surface storms. A narcissist can only manipulate you as long as they can stir the surface of your waters. When you practice awakened thinking, you begin living from the depth, not from the surface. Energetically, it is as if you unplug the cord connecting your nervous system to theirs. In the past, their state dictated your thoughts. When they were cold, you panicked. When they were silent, you spiraled. When they were angry, you blamed yourself. When you awaken, you create a subtle but decisive distance. You still see, you still perceive, but you no longer identify with everything you feel. You become the observer rather than the character being dragged into their script. This is not positive thinking, nor is it cheap self-comfort. This is turning on the light in the room of your mind. Jung said that whatever is not made conscious will control you, and you will call it fate. Awakened thinking is looking straight at fate and realizing it was only a pattern, a script, a program. Each time you catch yourself repeating an old pattern, over-explaining, self-blaming too quickly, worrying about what they think before asking what you feel, you reclaim mastery over your frequency. At the soul level, this is breaking the spell. The mantra, I'm wrong, I must fix myself to keep them, loses power the moment you call it by its true name. You realize this is programming. And when you see it as a program, you can choose to turn it off. Awakened thinking does not make you judge less, it makes you judge correctly. Instead of constantly judging yourself through the narcissist's lens, you begin evaluating the very thought running through your mind. You shift from being a victim of your thoughts to becoming the guardian of your energy, deciding what stays and what must leave. Spiritually, this is the greatest shift. Your energetic field is no longer an open highway for everything to pass through. It becomes a temple, with gates, with guards, with intention. And when that happens, the narcissist feels something unmistakable. They can no longer enter you. They speak, but you no longer swallow it whole. They go silent, but you no longer panic. They rage, but you see clearly that their anger is theirs, not a truth about you. At that point, even if you have done nothing externally, your energy field has changed. You are no longer an easy source of supply. You are a soul awakening. And for someone who survives on the unconsciousness of others, an awakening soul is a place where they cannot anchor for long. Principle 3. Solver the boundaries. When you restore spiritual order to your soul, they lose the power to define you. Boundaries are not just you saying no, not just blocking a number, not just putting up walls or becoming outspoken. Those are only outer expressions. True boundaries are an inner energetic shift, where you step into the center of yourself and declare through your presence, I no longer allow anyone to define me. Boundaries are the first spiritual order you rebuild after a lifetime of living inside other people's emotional chaos. And when that order is established, every force that relies on chaos to manipulate you begins to dissolve on its own. To understand the power of boundaries, you have to remember how an empath is formed. From a very young age, you learn to bend yourself to fit. You changed your energetic shape according to the adult's emotions. You made yourself smaller to avoid conflict. You twisted yourself to match their state so peace could be kept. You yielded, you carried, you shrunk to fit into the space they created. This built an unconscious program. I must contract myself to be accepted. And as you grew up, you carried that program into love without realizing it. A narcissist senses this emotional submission program very quickly. They push, you step back. They invade, you withdraw. They cross a line, you shrink a little more. Every time you step back to let it go, they step forward to take more. Not because they are stronger, but because you are not standing in your own center. You are standing in the outer ring, where you constantly adjust yourself according to other people's wishes. This is where boundaries become blurred, but principle 3 is the moment you reverse the axis. You pull your energy back from the periphery and return to the center, where your soul says, enough, this is sacred ground. No one enters unless I permit it. On the energetic level, boundaries are not walls, they are frequency. When you have boundaries, people feel them, even if you don't say a word. They feel the solidity in your voice. They feel the stillness in your eyes. They feel that you are no longer soft in the sense of being easily penetrated. You become high voltage. Touching you teaches others they must respect you. On the spiritual level, boundaries are the soul's declaration that you have stepped out of the role of the unconditional healer. It is you handing responsibility back to the one who should carry it. It is you refusing to let anyone dump their darkness into your energetic field anymore. It is the moment you discern what is mine, and for the narcissist, this is a catastrophe, because their power does not lie in being strong. It lies in how far they can cross your boundaries while you remain still. A narcissist rarely attacks head-on. They test lightly at first. A small insulting remark, a minor blame shift, a subtle belittling. If you do not respond, they push harder. If you accept, they escalate. If you comply, they register it as surrender. That is the cycle of energetic invasion. But when you establish sovereign boundaries, they come up against something they cannot pierce, a soul that has returned to itself. When you say no, You don't argue, you don't over-explain, you don't apologize for having boundaries. You simply stand there, steady, bright, still. And that very stillness is enough to strip their mask. Jung said that darkness cannot withstand the presence of consciousness. Wherever the light of the self is present, the shadow parts in others are exposed for what they are. And this is why narcissists hate boundaries so much. Boundaries force them to face their real self, empty, chaotic, out of control, with nothing left to cling to. When you have boundaries, the narcissist no longer has the power to define you, manipulate your emotions, control your reactions, place their responsibilities on you, make you feel guilty for wanting respect, force you to sacrifice yourself in order to keep them, convince you that your needs are selfish. Sovereign boundaries are the declaration. My needs are valid. My feelings are real. My space is sacred. And if you cannot respect that, you do not belong here. When you stand inside those boundaries, the narcissist has only two options. Drop the mask or leave your life. Either way, you win. Not by fighting, but by no longer allowing them access to the part of your soul they were never worthy to touch. 4. Principle 4. The silence of the soul. The silence an empath reaches after awakening is not surrender, and it is not coldness. It is a higher form of vibration, a kind of energy the narcissist cannot bear, because it shakes the foundations of their entire manipulation system. The silence of the soul is not about stopping speech, it is about stopping the handing over of energy. It is the moment you reclaim all the power that used to be scattered into explanations, arguments, self-defense, attempts to fix, attempts to save, attempts to make them understand. This is the silence Jung described as the withdrawal of consciousness from the darkness so that it collapses on its own. When you no longer give them your reactions, you cease to be the generator for their ego. And when the power source shuts down, their darkness shows itself exactly as it is. On the energetic level, the narcissist is not afraid of truth, they are afraid of silence. Because in silence they hear the echo of their own soul, empty, weak, fractured, full of contradictions. When you are quiet, they are forced to confront the inner voice they have been running from their entire life. That is why every time you go silent, they explode, create drama, provoke, pick fights, or suddenly act caring. They do not rush toward you because they love you, they rush toward you because they need noise from you to drown out the echo of themselves. The silence of the soul is completely different from the narcissist's silent treatment. Their silent treatment is a weapon to make you anxious. Your silence is a homecoming, where you no longer chase, no longer strain to explain, no longer carry other people's emotions for them. One is manipulation, the other is liberation. One creates addiction, the other creates healing. The silence of the soul happens when you realize it is not your words that are valuable, it is your presence. You no longer feel the need to prove you are right. You no longer crave for them to understand you. You no longer force your heart to express what the other person has no capacity to receive. Silence then becomes a statement. I will no longer let my energy be pulled into your vortex. When you are silent, you detach from their energetic field. Between two people who were once emotionally fused, this distance is as powerful as pulling a soul out of a matrix. You are not fighting them. You are not participating. You are simply leaving. And that very leaving is what causes their entire script to collapse. A narcissist cannot fight silence because silence offers no opposition. No reaction means no fuel. No fuel means no power. In the silence of the soul, you are not just walking away from an argument, you are walking away from the role you used to play in their drama. You are returning to the self, to the center Jung described as the still point that darkness cannot swallow. This is a frequency the narcissist cannot reach. They can touch your anger, your fear, your sense of lack, but they cannot touch your soul once it is standing upright in its own stillness. Your silence exposes them. Without you to hold them up, they must stand on their own, and they do not know how. Without you to explain, they must understand on their own, and they cannot. Without you to energetically heal them, they face the abyss within, and that is the collapse they fear most. The silence of the soul does not make you lose power, it makes you become power. Because in that stillness you hear yourself clearly for the first time. Your real needs, your real pain, your real intuition, your real limits, and in that same stillness you see through every illusion they ever built, empty apologies, false promises of healing, staged tenderness, obsessive I need you performances. Silence is light. Light does not need to shout. It only needs to be present. But once it is present, darkness cannot continue to exist. That is why Principle 4 always makes the narcissist begin to crumble long before you utter a single word. 5. Principle 5. The return to the true self. The return to the true self is not a journey you begin after escaping the narcissist. It is the very journey that frees you from them from the inside out. This is the principle Jung called the supreme authority of the self. The moment your soul steps back into the position it has always belonged to, the position of guide, not the one being led. On the energetic level, this is the moment you stop operating from complexes formed in childhood and begin living from the sacred center, where every decision is made not out of fear, but out of clarity. Throughout life, the empath has grown used to letting others define them. You're good when you do this. You're a good person when you make others happy. You're bad when you have needs of your own. Every sentence, every look, every behavior from your family in childhood became a mold you forced yourself into in order to survive. The narcissist simply reuses those molds, not because they are intelligent, but because you have never broken them. Self-sovereignty is the moment you crush those molds to dust and ask, who am I when I am no longer programmed? You begin to realize that your worth does not come from pleasing anyone. Love is not self-erasure. Kindness is not enduring everything. Maturity is not carrying other people's pain. This is an energetic reversal. Instead of orbiting other people's emotions, you turn back to the inner solar system of your own being, and in that moment you not only reclaim yourself, you become a version of you that the narcissist cannot control, cannot define, and can no longer touch. But you become that. The return to the true self is not about finding yourself, because the self was never lost. What disappeared was your ability to hear it. Self-sovereignty is when that voice returns. It speaks very differently from the voice of the wounded ego. The ego of an abandoned child speaks through fear. If I don't try harder, they will leave. The self whispers in stillness, no one has the right to be here if they do not honor this soul. The ego reacts. The self chooses. The ego seeks permission. The self defines. The ego chases. The self stands upright. The ego needs to be loved. The self knows it is worthy. And when the self becomes the center, all distorted energies dissolve. You no longer perceive yourself through other people's eyes. You no longer let someone else's mood determine your value. You no longer try to control their anger just to feel safe. You no longer feel guilty for setting limits. You no longer need them. This is not because you have become whole. It is because you have become whole. Jung said that the self is the totality of the psyche, where shadow and light are united. And when you return to the self, the narcissist loses their greatest advantage. They cannot manipulate someone who has integrated themselves. Self-sovereignty has another profound effect. You begin to attract people who don't require you to contort yourself. When you live from the self, you are only drawn to truth, not illusion. You immediately recognize those who operate from their shadow. You are no longer seduced by promises or emotional intensity. You see right through them at once, and they know it. A soul standing in the self makes those who live through a persona feel exposed. The closer a narcissist gets to you, the more they feel their false self being stripped away, and that is something they cannot bear. They do not leave because you are not enough. They leave because you see too much. Self-sovereignty is the moment choice returns to your hands. You no longer ask, how do I keep them? Instead, you ask, Is this person worthy of standing inside my energetic field? This is the reversal of power every awakened empath goes through. You are no longer the one being chosen, you are the one who chooses. And the moment you step into that state, all old identities dissolve, including the victim, the overfunctioning healer, the chaser, the one who always tries. You no longer need to prove anything. Your presence is enough. And in that moment, the spiral with the narcissist ends, without needing a dramatic conclusion. You are not just leaving them, you are leaving the version of yourself that was trapped with them. And when the true self returns, everything that does not belong to you falls away on its own. The return to the true self is not the final step of the journey. It is the first step of your real life. 6. Principle 6, returning to the body. The final restoration of an empath does not happen in the mind, nor does it happen in the emotions. It happens in the body itself, the place where all childhood wounds, survival reflexes, and suppressed emotional memories reside. Jung once said that the body is the most living part of the unconscious, and because of that, every narcissistic manipulation truly anchors into you only when you have left your body. From childhood, the empath learned to leave their body in order to survive. When your emotions were not safe, when your needs were dismissed, when your presence was not acknowledged, you left your body and went up into your head, where you read other people's emotions like a radar. You abandoned your trembling heartbeat, your shallow breath, the tightness in your stomach, and instead lived through outward, so-called intuition. You observed in order to predict. You felt for others in order to survive. You left home to avoid pain. And it is in this abandonment that the narcissist finds their entry. They do not invade through words or deeds alone. They invade through frequency. They make you vibrate. They make your body contract. They trigger a nervous system that has been conditioned to react since childhood. When you are disconnected from your body, you can no longer tell what is your anxiety and what is their chaos. You think the emotional storm is yours, but in reality it is their energy running through you. This is why you are so easily pulled in by the narcissist, why you can feel pain they never speak of, why your body reacts before their facial expression even changes. None of this is simply strong intuition. It is a sign you have not come home yet. Principle 6 is the act of reclaiming your own body. When you decide to return to your breath, your heartbeat, your sense of touch, the sensations of heat, cold, tightness, release in your muscles, you reclaim sacred ground that was left vacant. You no longer allow their energy to run unchecked through your chest. You begin to notice, is this contraction mine or theirs? And in the very moment you ask that question, the energetic cord is cut. The narcissist survives by pulling you out of your body, so that you exist inside their energetic field. But when you come back into the body, you come back into the real world. You come back to the place where your soul stands firm. You come back into a space they cannot reach. When you are in your body, they don't know where to hook you. When you can feel your own presence, they cannot so easily read your reactions. When you stand steady in the rhythm of your own heart, they cannot create inner tremors in you. And when your nervous system shifts from living to please into living from self-governance, their entire control system collapses. You no longer shake in response to them. You no longer shrink when their face changes. You no longer get swept into the game of silence, explosion, blame. You no longer feel them inside you. You realize, this is my body. No one is allowed to live here except me. This is the deepest energetic shift. You close the door, not by rejecting, but by being present. Not through rage, but by coming back to live inside your own skin and bones. Not by fighting, but by returning to the home your soul abandoned long ago. When you return to the body, they lose their final power. The power to touch you in the place you were once hurt the most. And that is the moment you not only escape them, you become untouchable. 7. Principle 7. Closing the energy gates. The final moment when an empath truly escapes a narcissist is not when you leave, and not even when you fall silent. It is when your energetic field shuts itself. When you no longer emit inviting signals, when there is no vibrational crack left, when there is no frequency through which they can hook into you. This is the stage Jung called the individuation seal, the imprint of a soul that has fully returned to itself. Closing the energy gates is not about building walls, it is about integration. When you become whole within yourself, there is no longer any part of you looking for salvation from the outside, and instantly, every form of manipulation loses its foothold. The narcissist never attacked you through action. They attack through openings. The fear of abandonment, the need to be seen, the habit of dissolving yourself to be loved, the obsession with being good enough. As long as these openings exist, you vibrate with them, and they only need to tap lightly for your door to swing open. But when you heal from within, not through willpower, but by reintegrating the parts of you that were separated from the self, the entire energetic crack seals itself. Not through force, but through wholeness. Closing the energy gates is the stage where you no longer react to them, not because you are restraining yourself, but because nothing inside you resonates with them anymore. Every place in your soul that once trembled when they pulled away is now steady ground. Every area that once opened to keep them satisfied has become sacred space, reserved only for the self. You no longer seek answers from them. You no longer seek validation from them. You no longer see them as an emotional point of reference. Your energy field shifts from outward facing to inward rooted, from shining in order to be accepted to radiating because you have become yourself. This is the moment the narcissist can no longer read you. The signals they once targeted, fear, emptiness, misplaced compassion, unconscious healing instinct, have all vanished as if you changed frequencies entirely. And indeed you have. You no longer broadcast, please see me. Your signal now is, I already see myself. When that happens, they lose access to you completely. They call, pew, do not resonate. They flatter, you do not soften. They threaten to leave, you do not panic. They go silent, you do not chase. They cry, you do not melt. They hover, you do not move. You are not cold, you are simply no longer connected energetically. This is the moment the cord decays. Not because you cut it, because it withered when you stopped feeding it. The narcissist never had real power. The only power they ever possessed was what you allowed through your unhealed wounds. When you close the energy gates, they become like someone knocking on a house that has been sealed. They can see light inside, but they cannot enter. They stand outside, confused, angry, desperate, until eventually they collapse when they realize you no longer exist on the frequency where they once controlled you. Closing the energy gates is not you fighting them. This is the great misunderstanding. You do not need to fight. You simply are no longer there. There is no part of you vibrating with their darkness. No frequency inside you that matches their emptiness. No fear left in you for them to manipulate. You have become the sole keeper of your own energy field. This is the supreme power of an awakened empath. You become a fortress, soul, not because you build walls, but because you return fully to your inner home. A whole person is not afraid of being left. A whole person does not need to prove anything. A whole person does not seek salvation outside. The whole person does not permit their energy to be drained. And a whole person is something a narcissist can never overpower. When you close the energy gates, you do not just escape the narcissist. You escape all the former versions of yourself that ever needed them. You no longer attract darkness. You no longer emit the frequency of pain. You no longer magnetize empty souls. You become someone who walks with your own rhythm. And in that precise moment, you are not just free, you become freedom. In the end, the journey of liberating an empath has never been a battle against the narcissist. It has always been the journey of returning to the essence you abandoned in order to survive. Every principle in these 7 principles is not a strategy, but a doorway back to a forgotten version of you. The sensitive child forced to become a raider. The unconscious healer who carried others' pain like destiny. The heart so wide it was mistaken for an infinite power source. The soul that kept shining inside someone else's darkness until it lost its own way home. And then one day, when you begin to look at that fracture with awareness instead of fear, the doorway of return opens. What removes the narcissist's power is not that you grow stronger than them, it is that you return to yourself. And when you return, they lose the only place they ever lived, your vibration. You detach emotionally. You decode their logic. You reclaim your sovereignty. You return to your body. You close the energy gates. Step by step, you dismantle every invisible hook they once embedded into the parts you did not yet know how to love. Until the final moment, when your energetic field becomes so whole that there is no opening for anyone to enter unless invited. You are not just free of them, you are free of the fragmented version of yourself. Jung said, no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And you have done exactly that. You looked into the place that once terrified you, the fear of abandonment, the fear of not being enough, the fear of losing connection. And you did not run. You stood there, and when you stood there, the darkness could no longer swallow you. You no longer attract empty souls, the ones looking for a place to cling, the starving egos chasing your light like energy-hungry shadows. You step into a phase where your energy no longer flows outward to sustain others, it flows inward, nourishing, illuminating, unifying, and elevating you. True freedom is not leaving a narcissist. True freedom is no longer emitting the vibration that allowed them to sense you from afar. When you shift your frequency, they disappear from your reality. No fighting, no revenge, no proving. You simply become the version your soul was always designed to be. And everything that is not yours falls away like a shadow, with nothing left to cling to. What you hold in your hands is not 7 principles. It is 7 keys, 7 doorways, 7 rebirths. And when you walk through that final door, you understand something no narcissist ever wants you to know. You were never weak. You just had never stood on the ground that belonged to you. That now you stand, silent. And from the moment you stand in your own light, no one can ever touch you the way they once did. This is not escaping them. This is returning to you. This is not an ending. This is a beginning. This is not freedom from someone else. This is the recognition that you are freedom itself. This is the recognition that you are freedom itself. And when an empath becomes a sovereign soul, the narcissist is no longer a threat. They become a lesson your light has outgrown. You are not just liberated, you have become someone who can never again be bound.